I think it wasn't as bad as some had expected. Capital gains tax was a lot more moderate in terms of the increase, so it rose to 24% at the high level from 20%. We've seen some increases in other taxes. Now, it was 40 billion ahead of the budget. There was expected to be 35 billion of tax increases. But on the other side of that, we're waiting for the spending reviews to come in May, so we don't quite know where the spending of that is going to happen. But we also got the OBR forecasts, and that was a bit of a mixed bag. Some weaker news on growth, some better news on the size of the fiscal deficit as we get to the end of this parliament.
الحكومة بالطبع تحاول أن تتجنب الفوضى في الأسواق المالية التي شهدناها في عهد الاستراس والتفاعل الحاد مع موازنة عام 2022. كيف برأيك سوف تستقبل الأسواق المالية تفاصيل هذه الموازنة؟
Yeah, I think there was a lot was signaled already. There was a lot of bad news baked into the markets, and that hasn't come to pass. So actually what we've seen, I think, is that this will be neutral for the pound, and it could take the pressure off some of the UK gilt yields. So they had risen 50 basis points since the low in September. They've come back a bit on budget day, and I think we're going to see a continuation of that, because essentially she's really prioritising fiscal stability and bringing down that fiscal deficit to about 2.1% of GDP by 2029. Now that is in such contrast to other countries in Europe, but also to the US, where both presidential candidates are going to raise the deficit no matter what.
وإلى أي مدى من الممكن أن يكون لهذه الموازنة وقع على معدل التضخم أو قرارات بنك إنجلترا القادمة؟
Yeah, well, the OBR forecasts, I think, are quite supportive of the Bank of England's current trajectory for interest rate cuts going into next year, because growth is fairly moderate. It wasn't fantastic growth. You know, it's 1.6% by 2029. They've definitely got room to do that. Now, the inflation forecast, they're hovering around 2%, so that is at the bank's target rate. So there's nothing in this budget that we see that will actually stop them from cutting interest rates down the line. Now, that's all based on projections. Obviously, reality can be very, very different, but it'd be interesting next week when we get the Bank of England's growth forecast. Are they going to upgrade like the OBR did? Because we have seen a bit of a difference with the OBR being a lot more optimistic about growth. Now, I think the OBR have toned down their growth optimism in this budget. So will the Bank of England actually meet them? So they could be singing from the same hymn sheet.
وزيرة الخزانة ريتشل ريفز تقول إنه المهمة رقم 1 بالطبع هي إنعاش النمو وتشجيع الاستثمار. إلى أي مدى برأيك تساهم هذه الموازنة في إنعاش النمو وتشجيع الاستثمار؟
Well, she is planning to invest a lot more than what she's raising in taxes, so that's 75 billion. And I think breaking up those fiscal rules, so saying that we're going to fund day-to-day spending with our tax take, and we're going to borrow only for investment, is probably a good thing. It's going to attract investors to the country, and that should boost growth down the line. However, we don't know how she's spending it. That's not going to come for another few months, for another 6-7 months. So we've got to wait for that, and the proof will be in the pudding then. These are also very long-term projects, so it's going to be a long time before we get that answer.